Theodor Herzl, born Benjamin Zdev Herzl, also known in Hebrew as Chosa Hamadina, was an Austro-Hungarian journalist, playwright, political activist, and writer. He was one of the fathers of modern political Zionism. Herzl formed the World Zionist Organization and promoted Jewish migration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state. Early life. He was born in Pest, the eastern, mostly flat part of Budapest, Kingdom of Hungary, to a secular Jewish family. His father's family were originally from Germany. He was the second child of Jeanette and Jacob Herzl, who were German-speaking, assimilated Jews. Jacob Herzl, Herzl's father, was a highly successful businessman. Herzl had one sister, Pauline, a year older than he was, who died suddenly on February 7, 1878, of typhus. Theodor lived with his family in a house next to the Dohany Street Synagogue located in Belvaros, the inner city of the historical Old Town of Pest, in the eastern section of Budapest. As a youth, Herzl aspired to follow in the footsteps of Ferdinand de Lesseps, builder of the Suez Canal, but did not succeed in the sciences and instead developed a growing enthusiasm for poetry and the humanities. This passion later developed into a successful career in journalism and a less celebrated pursuit of playwriting. According to Amos Elon, Herzl considered himself to be an atheist. In 1878, after the death of his sister, Pauline, the family moved to Vienna, Austria-Hungary. At the University of Vienna, Herzl studied law. As a young law student, Herzl became a member of the German nationalist Burschenschaft Albia, which had the motto Ehre, Freiheit, Vaterland. He later resigned in protest at the organization's antisemitism. After a brief legal career in the University of Vienna and Salzburg, he devoted himself to journalism and literature, working as a journalist for a Viennese newspaper and a correspondent for Neue Freie Presse in Paris, occasionally making special trips to London and Istanbul. He later became literary editor of Neue Freie Presse, and wrote several comedies and dramas for the Viennese stage. His early work did not focus on Jewish life. It was of the feuilleton order, descriptive rather than political. Zionist intellectual and activist. As the Paris correspondent for Neue Freie Presse, Herzl followed the Dreyfus Affair, a notorious anti-Semitic incident in France in which a French Jewish army captain was falsely convicted of spying for Germany. Herzl was witness to mass rallies in Paris following the Dreyfus trial, where many chanted "Death to the Jews." Herzl came to reject his early ideas regarding Jewish emancipation and assimilation and to believe that the Jews must remove themselves from Europe and create their own state. Herzl came to believe through the trial that the officer was wrongly convicted. It may have been as a witness to the trial of Colonel Dreyfus that converted him to a Zionist cause, and make a decision to emigrate to Britain in 1896. Herzl's editors of Neue Freie Presse refused any publication of his Zionist political activities. According to Henry Wickham-Steed, he was fanatically devoted to the propagation of Jewish German, liberal, assimilationist doctrine. The sense of injustice against the Jews was certainly made much worse by the discrimination. A mental clash gripped Herzl. Between the craving for literary success and a desire to act as a public figure, he started writing pamphlets about a Jewish state. I published a pamphlet which resulted in the establishment of the Zionist movement. His testimony before the British Royal Commission reflected his fundamental, romantic liberal view on life as the problem of the Jews. There is, however, some debate on the extent to which Herzl was readily influenced by the Dreyfus Affair. Some, such as Kornberg, claim that this is a myth, that Herzl did not feel necessary to deflate, and that he also believed that Dreyfus was guilty. In June 1895 he wrote in his diary, In Paris, as I have said, I achieved a freer attitude toward anti-Semitism. Above all, I recognized the emptiness and futility of trying to combat anti-Semitism. However, in recent decades historians have downplayed the influence of the Dreyfus affair on Herzl. They have shown that, while upset by antisemitism evident in French society, he, like most contemporary observers, initially believed in Dreyfus's guilt and only claimed to have been inspired by the affair years later when it had become an international cause célèbre. Rather, it was the rise to power of the anti-Semitic demagogue Karl Lueger in Vienna in 1895 that seems to have had a greater effect on Herzl. Before the pro-Dreyfus campaign had fully emerged, it was at this time that he wrote his play, The New Ghetto, which shows the ambivalence and lack of real security and equality of emancipated, well-to-do Jews in Vienna. Around this time Herzl grew to believe that antisemitism could not be defeated or cured, only avoided, and that the only way to avoid it was the establishment of a Jewish state. Beginning in late 1895, Herzl wrote Der Judenstaat, which was published February 1896 to immediate acclaim and controversy. The book argued that the Jewish people should leave Europe if they wished to, either for Argentina or, preferably, for Palestine, their historic homeland. The Jews possessed a nationality, all they were missing was a nation and a state of their own. Only through a Jewish state could they avoid anti-Semitism, express their culture freely and practice their religion without hindrance. Herzl's ideas spread rapidly throughout the Jewish world and attracted international attention. Supporters of existing Zionist movements, such as the Hovevei Zion, immediately allied themselves with him. But establishment Jewry vilified him and considered his ideas as a threat to their attempts at integration and a rebellion against God. A philosophy for a homeland in Der Judenstaat, he writes, the Jewish question persists wherever Jews live in appreciable numbers. Wherever it does not exist, it is brought in together with Jewish immigrants. We are naturally drawn into those places where we are not persecuted, and our appearance there gives rise to persecution. This is the case, and will inevitably be so, everywhere, even in highly civilized countries. See, for instance, France. So long as the Jewish question is not solved on the political level, the book concludes. Therefore I believe that a wondrous generation of Jews will spring into existence. The Maccabees will rise again. Let me repeat once more my opening words. The Jews who wish for a state will have it. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil, and die peacefully in our own homes. The world will be freed by our liberty, enriched by our wealth, magnified by our greatness, and whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare, will react powerfully and beneficially for the good of humanity. Diplomatic liaison with the Ottomans. Herzl began to energetically promote his ideas, continually attracting supporters, Jewish and non-Jewish. According to Norman Rose, Herzl mapped out for himself the role of martyr, as the Parnell of the Jews. On March 10, 1896, Herzl was visited by Reverend William Heckler, the Anglican minister to the British Embassy. Heckler had read Herzl's Der Judenstaat, and the meeting became central to the eventual legitimization of Herzl and Zionism. Herzl later wrote in his diary, "Next we came to the heart of the business. I said to him, I must put myself into direct and publicly known relations with a responsible or non-responsible ruler, that is, with a minister of state or a prince. Then the Jews will believe in me and follow me." The Grand Duke was the uncle of the German Emperor Wilhelm II. Through the efforts of Heckler and the Grand Duke, Herzl publicly met Wilhelm II in 1898. The meeting significantly advanced Herzl's and Zionism's legitimacy in Jewish and world opinion. In May 1896, the English translation of Der Judenstaat appeared in London as The Jewish State. Herzl had earlier confessed to his friend Max Bodenheimer that he wrote what I had to say without knowing my predecessors. and it can be assumed that I would not have written it, Der Judenstaat, had I been familiar with the literature. In Istanbul, Ottoman Empire, June 15, 1896, Herzl saw an opportunity. With the assistance of Count Philip Mitchell-Niewlensky, a sympathetic Polish émigré with political contacts in the Ottoman court, Herzl attempted to meet Sultan Abdul-Hamid II in order to present his solution of a Jewish state to the Sultan directly. He failed to obtain an audience but did succeed in visiting a number of highly placed individuals, including the Grand Vizier, who received him as a journalist representing the Neue Freie Presse. Herzl presented his proposal to the Grand Vizier. The Jews would pay the Turkish foreign debt and attempt to help regulate Turkish finances if they were given Palestine as a Jewish homeland under Turkish rule. Prior to leaving Istanbul, June 29, 1896, Niewlensky obtained for Herzl a symbolic Medal of Honor. The medal, the Commander's Cross of the Order of the Medjidi, was a public relations affirmation for Herzl and the Jewish world of the seriousness of the negotiations. 5 years later, May 17, 1901, Herzl did meet with Sultan Abdul-Hamid II. But the Sultan refused Theodor Herzl's offer to consolidate the Ottoman debt in exchange for a charter allowing the Zionists access to Palestine. Returning from Istanbul, Herzl traveled to London to report back to the Maccabees, a proto-Zionist group of established English Jews led by Colonel Albert Goldsmid. In November 1895 they received him with curiosity, indifference and coldness. Israel Zangwill bitterly opposed Herzl, but after Istanbul Goldsmid agreed to support Herzl. In London's East End, a community of primarily Yiddish-speaking recent Eastern European Jewish immigrants, Herzl addressed a mass rally of thousands on July 12, 1896 and was received with acclaim. They granted Herzl the mandate of leadership for Zionism. Within 6 months this mandate had been expanded throughout Zionist Jewry. The Zionist movement grew rapidly. A World Congress in 1897, at considerable personal expense, he founded Die Welt of Vienna, Austria-Hungary, and planned the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. He was elected president, and in 1898 he began a series of diplomatic initiatives to build support for a Jewish country. He was received by Wilhelm II on several occasions, one of them in Jerusalem, and attended the Hague Peace Conference, enjoying a warm reception from many statesmen there. His work on auto-emancipation was prefigured by a similar conclusion drawn by Marx's friend Moses Hess, in Rome and Jerusalem. Pinxer had never yet read it, but was aware of the distant and far-off Hibbert Zion. Herzl's philosophical instruction highlighted the weaknesses and vulnerabilities. To Herzl, each dictator or leader had a nationalistic identity, even down to the Irish from Wolfe Tone onwards. He was drawn to the mawkishness of Judaism rendered distinctively as German, but he remained convinced that Germany was the center of anti-Semitism rather than France. In a much-quoted aside he noted, "If there is one thing I should like to be, it is a member of old Prussian nobility," and detested them. Herzl was defiant of their social authority. He also shared Pinxer's pessimistic opinion that the Jews had no future in Europe, that they were too anti-Semitic to tolerate because each country in Europe had tried anti-Semitic assimilation. In Berlin they said Judenraus, in a well-worn phrase. Herzl therefore advocated a mass exodus from Europe to the Judenstaat. Pinxer's manifesto was a cry for help, a warning to others, man ruf, a call for attention to their plight. Herzl's vision was less about mental states of Jewry, and more about delivering prescriptive answers about land. The idea that I have developed is a very old one, it is the restoration of the Jewish state, was a follow-up of Pinxer's early weaker version Man Rufen Sent Stammers Genos and von einem Nassischen Juden. Herzl, Zionism and the Holy Land. Herzl visited Jerusalem for the first time in October 1898. He deliberately coordinated his visit with that of Wilhelm II to secure what he thought had been prearranged with the aid of Rev. William Heckler, public world power recognition of himself and Zionism. Herzl and Wilhelm II first met publicly on October 29, at Mikveh, Israel, near present-day Holon, Israel. It was a brief but historic meeting. He had a second formal, public audience with the emperor at the latter's tent camp on Street of the Prophets in Jerusalem on November 2, 1898. The English Zionist Federation, the local branch of the World Zionist Organization, was founded in 1899. That Herzl had established in Austria in 1897. In 1902-3, Herzl was invited to give evidence before the British Royal Commission on Alien Immigration. His appearance brought him into close contact with members of the British government, particularly with Joseph Chamberlain, then Secretary of State for the Colonies, through whom he negotiated with the Egyptian government for a charter for the settlement of the Jews in Al-Arish in the Sinai Peninsula, adjoining southern Palestine. In 1903, Herzl attempted to obtain support for the Jewish homeland from Pope Pius X, an idea broached at 6th Zionist Congress. Palestine could offer a safe refuge for those fleeing persecution in Russia. Cardinal Raphael Merry-del-Val ordained that the Church's policy was explained non possumus on such matters, decreeing that as long as the Jews denied the divinity of Christ, the Catholics could not make a declaration in their favor. The pogroms included 47 Jews murdered at Kishinev, and hundreds more injured, the property looted and destroyed. The delegates to the Congress backed Herzl's line of argument. A vociferous minority of opposition came from those who thought adoption of a Ugandan plan over Palestine was a sellout. Still later the East African scheme failed, dying with Herzl himself. It was taken off the agenda in 1905. Yet another nationalistic splinter group with Zionist aspirations, in England called the Jewish Territorial Association, was founded. After the failure of that scheme, which took him to Cairo, he received, through Leopold Greenberg, an offer from the British government to facilitate a large Jewish settlement, with autonomous government and under British suzerainty, in British East Africa. At the same time, the Zionist movement was threatened by the Russian government. Accordingly, Herzl visited St. Petersburg and was received by Sergei Witt, then finance minister, and Vyacheslav Plehve, minister of the interior, the latter placing on record the attitude of his government toward the Zionist movement. On that occasion Herzl submitted proposals for the amelioration of the Jewish position in Russia. He published the Russian statement, and brought the British offer, commonly known as the Uganda Project, before the 6th Zionist Congress, carrying the majority on the question of investigating this offer, after the Russian delegation stormed out. In 1905 the 6th Zionist Congress, after investigations, decided to decline the British offer and firmly committed itself to a Jewish homeland in Palestine, a Heimstatt, a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine secured by public law.